I've been working as a designer, I'd say, for the last decade or so, but pivoted to product and service design in the last 5 to 7 years. And right now, I'm working with a health tech startup in the US called Legacy. And what we're trying to do is use AI and ML, essentially data science, to enable clinicians providing goal concordant care to patients who are seriously ill or terminally ill. A lot of people don't know about service design. And then what that implies is they certainly don't know or see the value of service designers. Service design really tries to understand, plan, and organize um, people, processes, systems, technologies to ultimately provide a better and improved experience for the customer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. This week with me, I have Yash Jain. Yash is a service designer from SCAG. Yash, please introduce yourself.
Hi, guys. My name is Yash, as Abhay said. I am a product and service designer, originally born and raised in India, and now moved to the US. I've been working as a designer, I'd say, for the last decade or so, but pivoted to product and service design in the last 5 to 7 years. And right now, I'm working with a health tech startup in the US called Legacy. And what we're trying to do is use AI and ML, essentially data science, to enable clinicians providing goal concordant care to patients who are seriously ill or terminally ill. And this is particularly important because it helps us understand the patient. It helps us understand what matters to them, what kind of care they want, and doesn't feel like healthcare is kind of like a menu card service. So we're trying to integrate a lot of emerging technologies into ensuring that who patients are and what they're doing is transferred over to the next touch point so that no matter what kind of clinician is caring for the patients, they still have complete context. Um, yeah, so that's what I'm doing now.
That's really interesting. So, before we jump into the AI part and what project you're working on right now, I'd like to understand how did you land up in service design? Like, what was your journey into service design?
That is really, at least for me, it's been like quite an evolution. And there's like two ways I would answer this. One is slightly funnier than the other. I think so. I'm a Jain Marwari. And for those of you who don't know, we're really well known for providing good quality services, especially to people who come over as guests. And so that is one part. And I feel like I've lived through that, really understanding the person in front of us, the audience, and like trying to provide the best experience we can from the perspective of having guests. So that's one part. But the second part is, I'd say, um, from early on in my career, like I've been very involved in physical experiences and how I might use my skill to do that better. So I started off as an artist, virtually painting for murals, creating installations, making entire homes and offices. And so this is really rooted in ensuring that the physical experience that a person has in that space feels most optimum. Um, so that was an important part of my journey, which kind of brought me the ground rules of understanding, okay, how do people feel, think, and behave when they're going through a particular service. Then shortly after, I founded a cultural center, and this was again back in India in my home city. And we were doing a lot of work in arts, culture, and entertainment. And essentially, that was also a service because we're trying to curate events, we're doing a lot of education, we're doing a lot of training and workshops and things like that. So it's almost like I made the choice without really knowing that I made the choice. And through the evolution that I've had as a designer, of course, back then I didn't know what service design is or what the entire system is. But as I progressed through my career, I got more insight into that, and finally decided to pursue a master's in service design. It also, interestingly, has a huge connection with what I studied in my undergrad, which is economics, completely unrelated to what I do right now. But interestingly enough, economics is also about people and systems and governments and processes in understanding what is the experience of the economic condition of a nation. So again, like using that same analogy, what I do now is really understanding systems and how it affects and impacts all of the different people, stakeholders, technologies, and so on, which become a part of that system.
Nice. So it's becoming a recurring theme that people who have done different things in undergrad somehow their major ties up into it. Because I was talking to Louise last week, and she was a veterinarian and she was working with animals, and now she's doing sustainability design to conserve like marine life and things like that. So it's really crazy how things tie up together at the end. Um, so for people listening, just could you just take us to what service design is? Like, what are the like main few aspects of service design?
Absolutely. So service design is, and this is the answer I try to give a lot of people. Concept design is exactly what it sounds like. We're designing services, and services are tangible and intangible experiences people have over a continuum of time and across multiple touch points. So think of, let's say, an airport, like where you're taking a flight from point A to point B. That is a service because it goes on through a period of time. It involves the airport, it involves the staff, it involves the airline, it involves your luggage, and so on and so forth. But for the customer, it's still part of one singular experience. So service design really tries to understand, plan, and organize um, people, processes, systems, technologies to ultimately provide a better and improved experience for the customer. So using the same example, like some things that we would concern ourselves with is, well, how easy is it for people to book flights? How easy is it for people to navigate through the airport without constantly having to check different documents? How effective is this process for the staff, for government agencies, for security agencies, and so on, to ensure that the security and compliances of an airport is still met while we continue to improve the service for the customer? And then ultimately, all of this ties down to the business, right? Because the business should end up making money, it should impact the bottom line. So then we also try and think about how services and our work in that either reduces costs, increases revenue, increases partnerships, and so on. So it's really like, think of it as a Lego kind of function where we're changing different pieces, we're adding something new, we're like modifying existing things to ultimately create better and better buildings that people would
Mhm.
like to live in.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So I even that now that you're in the healthcare system, I remember my roommate was also a service designer and he was working on the emergency health system here in America, and they have like a lot of problems with the entire service of healthcare here in general. Medicinal, like what part of it are you looking at specifically at your work right now? What part of it are you trying to improve?
So, well, let's start with this. The type of customers that we're trying to solve for are people who have serious illnesses, chronic illnesses, terminal illnesses. So, think of a cancer patient, think of somebody who has dementia, and these are could also be very well like older folks, probably above 60, 65, 70, with um, a lot of uncertainties that they face. So, where we come in is that patients undergo various treatments, and sometimes these treatments do not end up um, giving the patients the outcome that they want. For example, if there's a cancer patient with like a third stage cancer, and the treatments that they're undergoing just is not able to make them continue to walk, is means that they're like tied to a machine for half the day and so on and so forth. But that's really not what's important to many patients. Like we find that a lot of patients prefer quality of life over quantity. So maybe one of the important goals for this patient, when they know that they have very limited time available, is they want to attend their children's wedding, they want to see their grandchildren graduate, or they want to go for a certain concert or event that they're really looking forward to. But the kind of care that they sometimes receive does not ensure that, because it doesn't, clinicians and people who are caring for these patients are not able to get to that point due to a lot of systemic barriers, and so on. So what we're trying to do is optimizing this entire process And we're really not in the business of care delivery. Like we're not trying to replace clinicians or, create a new hospital or anything. We're simply a tool using technology to ensure that the conversations that happen between clinicians and patients provide us rich insight into what patients want and then translate that forward.
Is that where the AI comes in? Is the AI making better conversations? How does AI plug into this whole process?
Is well, uh, without getting into too much detail because I wouldn't be able to, I'd say the AI is really trying to optimize this entire process. And um, so the thing with clinicians is that they oftentimes don't have enough time, and there's a lot of documentation that they need to do to ensure that all of the information that they've captured is correct, is relevant, and adds to the insight that we want to have about a patient. Like, what is important to Abhay? Is it important that he is able to live a good life, is able to like eat, sleep, and bathe on their own, or is it important that they're alive for the next 12 months or 24 months at virtually any cost? So we're using these emerging technologies to able to answer those questions in a very short amount of time and as accurately as possible.
Yeah, and I think we're on the cusp of something, of some great technology coming out in the next couple of years. Like I think AI agents are coming out in the next couple of months, and then we're on the cusp of ASI and AGI and things like that. But where do you see AI plugging into services like this? Do you see a lot of scope for AI in service design?
Absolutely. And I'd say like there's a lot of scope for AI in whatever kind of problem you're solving for. I think what's more important is to understand if it is the right fit and to what degree. Because AI can virtually try to optimize or improve any kind of, you know, administrative process, clerical process, um, and so on and so forth. So we definitely will see a lot of that in services, in products, and virtually all kinds of experiences, not only at the customer end, but definitely also in the business end when we're trying to create a lot of products and services to ultimately improve that.
Yeah, I think that's the flow that we're going in. I think it's first hitting the business end of things. Like the customer end of it is taking off a little bit, but I feel enterprise level agents will change the game. Like whatever is coming in the next 1 year is definitely gonna change like a lot of things. Like how you are using it, I think a lot of people are gonna creatively use it to change like service in general. Yeah, like a lot of points are going to change about it. Any particular uh, AI technologies or anything that you've seen of late that you're really interested in?
Well, so I'm at this point in my career, I'm very interested in data. And that's also a very relevant aspect of what I do in my everyday work. So I'm very interested in seeing how these new tools and technologies are able to create integrated workspaces. And we've seen early signs of this with what Notion is doing, with what Zoom is now doing with the Zoom workspace, with
Right.
what new browsers like Arc and these kind of companies are doing, is to be able to create integrated spaces where a lot of that person's data is connected either in a professional context or a personal context, because um, our work is spread out in such a manner that there's so much context switching, there's so much noise, there's so much like overwhelm that we feel on a day-to-day basis. So I'm specifically interested in seeing what these integrated workspaces look and feel like, and then how do they add to the work that people are doing.
Yeah, like I think it's going to be interesting to see the next couple of years, like what designers come up with using AI. Also, like I think that's also an interesting part of it, because even in design for sustainability, like advertising, my major, it's already taken over most of the low level jobs. I've seen that coming. But it's interesting to see how it's going to affect other designers as well, and it's really interesting to watch it in real time. Like new technologies are coming out every week, so we've been on like a crazy improvement curve. So it's interesting to see where this is going. So I'm really interested in the AI part of it as well, and I love that you guys are using it to actually help people, because that's what I feel like. A lot of people hype the AI thing up, and then they think AI will do everything, but that AI is just a tool, and it's more of how you're plugging it in and how you're using it and how you're getting it to help people is the more important part there. Which I think you guys are on a good path with your office, because I think that medically, I think there is a huge service problem in America, at least with the health industry in general. What are some of your observations with the health industry here now that you're working in it?
I'd say it's there's so much compliance that goes into it, right? Um, Clinicians are burnt out. They have a lot of things to do apart from just caring for patients. There's a lot of administrative work. There's a lot of documentation work. There's a lot of work with respect to keeping up with new practices, with new research, and then so this is all like in the realm of providing care. And then there's the other side of it, which is for health systems, which ultimately is also a business, right? And clinicians and doctors are responsible to ensure that health systems are also successful. They're also able to, provide care for patients, because there's just like how there's food deserts in America, there's also, similar scenarios and situations in healthcare where a lot of people who really need these care services are not able to access it, or are certainly not able to pay for it. So I think that's a very big problem that we see. And now, because clinicians are so burnt out, we see a lot of emerging tools which help clinicians do their jobs much faster and in far lesser time. And this is something which is going to be very critical to ensure that they're able to like be there, give as much time to patients as possible. And there's a very nice visual I saw the other day. It was a cartoon figure of a patient on the bed surrounded by many doctors, and they were just zoned into their computers or laptops trying to do a lot of documentation work. And there was just one speech bubble which from the perspective of the patient, which said that I would like my doctors to look at me and not look at the computers. And I think this is another, at least a problem which is very relevant to us right now and what we're trying to solve for. Um, so yeah, that's what I'd say.
So, how do you measure the success of a service design project? What are some of the metrics?
Because I feel like a lot of service designers spend so much time thinking about it. And I'd say the way I like to think about it is really like concentric circles, right? So the innermost circle for me is the teams and the people responsible for the service design project. And we try to understand or rather see the impact of what we're creating. Are we able to imagine that? Are we able to contextualize that in and see people actually using it and benefiting from it? Are we able to see that the insights that we've got, the unmet needs that we've identified for various people, like, are they being really met, or are we just trying to solve for superficial problems which are really sometimes not deep rooted or the real cause, the real problems? So that's the innermost circle for me. Then it kind of extends out to the business. And like I was saying before, any kind of service project is so deep rooted in the business. It should ultimately improve the bottom line. It should ultimately improve how the business is taking care of their customers, what they're serving for. Is it still aligned with the same vision? Are they doing it in the same vein, or is this like a new philosophy altogether? Is it helping them, reach new customers? Is it helping them uh, solve for different things for existing customers? And really how it impacts the various metrics relevant to the business. And then finally, we see the impact on all of the users and customers which become part of the service. So now, after something has been designed or thought of, it's been developed, it's in testing, and we're ready to actually roll it out. Do we see people using it in the way they would like them to use it? Do they benefit from it in the way that they had said they do? And how is all of this impacting the experience that this customer has while using the product or service? So I think what I'm trying to get at is the impact of a service design project is really multifold. and very specific to the type of stakeholder which we look for. So the impact of a project for an end customer versus an employee versus the business versus a third party stakeholder could be very different. And it really matters how well we're able to satisfy their needs.
Yeah, but I think service design is like a multifaceted thing because you're trying to solve like the parts of the entire process and like trying to look at the whole picture. So it is a very multifaceted thing. So what is your process like when it comes to service design? I know people use like designers use a lot of different structures to approach their work, but every designer has a unique process. What is your process when it comes to service design? Is it more of the insights for you? Is it more of observation? Like, what is your main part of it? Like, what do you enjoy doing the most out of it?
I really, I think on different days I enjoy different things, and that's one of the nice things of about being a service designer because we're looking after or looking over so many different things. So there are phases where my process starts with a lot of research, whether that's with certain users, certain stakeholders, even from literature and academia, especially in healthcare. Literature reviews and research is so important because we have to make sure that we're aligned with how the rest of the industry is thinking about something. Um, so usually the process starts there because we're trying to find various insights about a certain problem space. And oftentimes, like things and information have a way of surprising you. So when you get into the project, you might think that the problem is that we don't have enough time. But then once you get into it, you realize that it's not really about the time. Maybe it's about the technologies that people are using, and it just takes a lot of time, or it uses language which is not relevant for that type of person. So it usually starts there, which is again rooted in a lot of research. And then we try to bring insights from that research and apply it to what the entire end-to-end service looks like. So then I try to spend a lot of time on, okay, so we've learned A, B, C, D about this. Now, how do these learnings fit into number one, what we're trying to create, and number two, into what the customer really wants to solve for or improve? So this kind of becomes this creative ideation space, which is again something that I enjoy doing a lot because it requires so much back and forth. It requires creative and critical thinking as well, and then it requires collaboration with a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders. So probably that is something which I enjoy the most and is a very core part of my process, which is taking these insights, spreading it out to everybody who is involved in the project or might even use it, and then see how they respond and react to that.
Interesting. So, how do you think, like, sometimes, like you were saying, asking the right questions is part of getting the right answer. And it's really interesting, the process of designers and design thinking. So, how do you think organizations can foster a culture of like design thinking and collaboration? What are some of the successful things that you've seen in the field?
I would say I'm not really a fan of design thinking because I really look at it as a process which happens in a silo. Like I look at it more like systems thinking because we should always keep thinking about end-to-end workflows, end-to-end journey of the customer. So a lot of designers who are supposed to work on specific parts of the product think of it as, okay, we need to understand what a user wants to achieve in this particular aspect of their journey, and so that's the only thing that we look for. It's kind of like having blinds on you and you're racing ahead without really seeing what else is happening to the customer around what you're trying to solve for. So I would really say, as an answer to that question, that organizations should think of um, extending design thinking and integrating that with systems thinking and really educating teams about what all is happening in the overall experience of the customer and breaking down like information silos that we often see between teams, like what a certain team might be building for the same customer, and the insights that they get from that process might be very relevant to what is happening with another team for the same type of customer, but maybe a completely different product, or certainly a different part of the product. So yeah, breaking down information silos and
Systems thinking is more important.
are more relevant. And I would also say, like, we're certainly seeing a lot of organizations trying to think about it or trying to inculcate it, especially those who have the right kind of resources or are then solving for customers who have such elaborate problems or elaborate workflows. And we're also seeing a lot of tools which are supporting teams now to get this shared understanding of the customer and to be able to also share that with all the relevant people inside the organization. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I would love to see other organizations who may not be as big or have the same kind of resources, at least try to inculcate that process. And in my opinion, it really starts with the designer because they're the ones responsible for creating this culture and representing that in the organization.
Completely agree. Completely agree. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a service designer?
I'd say a lot of people don't know about service design. And then what that implies is they certainly don't know or see the value of service designers. And it's funny because in so many job descriptions for UX designers, for UX researchers, for product designers, and so on, it could like literally be copied and pasted into a role of a service designer. Um, but we just that vocabulary doesn't exist. The vocabulary that is required for the success of a service designer and a service design project doesn't exist to that same degree in a lot of organizations that we see. And certainly those organizations who need it a lot. So I'd say that that baseline education is quite a big challenge. And then the second challenge is service design doesn't happen by one person or by one type of designer or one type of individual. It really is a collaborative process. And I cannot stress on this enough. Like the success of a service design project depends a lot on how collaborative that entire process was, how many different stakeholders were involved in the creation of that of the entire process, because we need insights and views from all of these different stakeholders to make sure that this service is actually is going to be desirable, it's going to be viable, and it's going to be feasible, because without which we can't truly make something which, at least with the same degree of optimization and efficiency. So a lot of times it's just not possible to get people's time or have them, be a part of the process across like multiple times. Maybe you have them available in the start of the project, in the middle, or towards the end, but certainly not throughout the entire system of the process. So that's another challenge, I'd say, and quite an important one.
And you touched upon my next question as well. So I'm gonna say, what are some of the most like worst misconceptions people have when you tell them you're a service designer? What are some other things that you've heard? Like this is another interesting. Like I was asking Simran and Sunanda, who are graphic designers, about what they did, and people had no idea what graphic designers and what these guys actually do. So from you, like what are some of the things that you heard about service design? What do people actually think when you tell them you're a service designer?
Well, I'd say the most common response is they're just, huh? What is that? What do you do? And so, like I mentioned before, it's really like that education is missing or that vocabulary is missing because it's still such a nascent field.
Yeah, right.
So it makes perfect sense. And I like really enjoy when people ask me what service design is or what I do, because it gives me the opportunity to represent this industry and to try and take this forward. But to come back to your question, I'd say a lot of misconceptions. Number one, it really is a collaborative process. Um, People also think that service design is purely digital. And maybe that's because we live in such a digital first world. But oftentimes, services will virtually always have a physical component. In the same example of, traveling from point A to point B via flight, we have physical components. But a lot of people don't think of it in that manner, at least through when imagining what a service designer does. The same thing could be said about, Airbnb or Uber and all of these companies, because they have such an important physical component. And service designers do have to think about the context in the specific part of the customer journey. So
Mm.
the the persona of a customer who is at home, completely relaxed on a Sunday afternoon, interacting with the service, or at least a part of the service, would be very different than the context of a customer who has just lost their phone in the cab and are trying to get in touch with Uber and make sure that they don't lose their valuable item. So context is something which is another misconception about service design, because people, when they think about it, often ignore it, right? Again, because we live in such a product focused world. Um, so that's a very critical thing. And again, like I mentioned before, collaboration is such an important aspect of it, not only during the process of designing or improving a service, but more than that, like once something is out there and launched and people are actually using it, we have to constantly collaborate with users, with the different stakeholders, continually test it, continually improve it. And people think that the job of a service designer ends when they are able to ideate and create a service and launch it. But the real work begins after that, because that's when people are actually using it. So it's a constant iterative process. And lastly, I'll say service design is so much about systems, and it's so much about like fine tuning things and unblocking value and looking for unmet needs, which might not lie with the customer. Like, for example, if the end customer is unable to um, on board onto a certain platform, we might think that, okay, they feel frustrated with this onboarding process, so we need to change something. But maybe the real problem lies in the writing that's gone into the onboarding, maybe or into the questions that we ask them in the onboarding. Because let's say these people, when they onboard, are oftentimes in a hurry, don't have their laptops or desktops and such, are on their phones quickly trying to do something. So we have to think about how the entire system is functioning for that specific part of the customer journey.
I completely agree. Like initially when you were saying, I was one of those designers who always thought the solution or a product is always digital. And then we forget like the physical aspect is way more important for a lot of these products. And that is where the major impact for customers is when they're interacting with your product. So it's that's really interesting that you said that. So do you have any advice for new people entering into service design?
That's so much, and I think that could be a whole like other podcast altogether. But um, I'd say it's similar to some of the things that we've been discussing now, which is make sure that you're not only focusing on the digital aspects, and focusing on the how wonderful your designs look, or how well the animations are, or what kind of interactivity you embed into a product touch point for a service. But really think about the context in which people would use it, and whether something like that actually makes sense for the customer in that specific touch point. Another thing I'd say is like keep working with as many different people, because in a service design career, you'd be speaking and talking to a variety of people throughout a certain project that you're a part of. And so it really requires this kind of like curiosity and embedding yourself into the shoes of that particular stakeholder, because those values and those insights are equally as important as a customer's might be. So keeping your eye out for, collaborating with a lot of people, is critical. Be able to communicate this to a variety of stakeholders is critical. And I'd say finally, like, you just have to keep testing. And that's probably not specific to service design. I'd say now we see that as part of any kind of design process. But I notice this a lot with up and coming designers or those who are entering the field, is that they oftentimes ignore the testing and iteration part, and just focus on, okay, I'm here to create a page for something, and that's what I'll focus on and move on. So it's, I think, cultivating the mindset of what happens after you've delivered on a certain project or brief. Starting to think about that will be far more valuable than how well they've done a certain project or how beautiful that looks.
Completely agree. And if a lot of designers get attached to the first version of their designs and they take it personally, whoever, like generally people who are new to design, because you get a lot of feedback and you have to, there are a lot of moving parts for any design. I'm sure like any design process, like you keep getting feedback and you need to keep changing things based on the feedback. So it's really good advice. But that's all for today, Yash. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're in India and you actually, like, there's a huge time difference. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know we've been planning it for a bit, but I'm glad we made it happen.
I'm glad to, Abhay. Thank you so much. This was really wonderful.